Hey Daily Dosers, my name is Chris Hilken. Today we're talking about the fourth evidence for God's existence. So the fourth evidence goes like this. In our world, we seem to have these things that we want to satisfy. We talked about that, right? We said, what's the best explanation for everything we observe in our universe? And one of those things is what we call objective moral values and duties. It means there are things in our world that are right and they are wrong. And we think that certain things are good and certain things are evil. And we have this feeling that's pretty universal across the board. And the question is, where does that come from? And is there actually a reasonable foundation for why the ideas aren't anything more than opinions? Think about it. Some people would say, well, all morality is objective. All morality is relative. So they would say, whatever a culture votes on, what is good and what is wrong, that's what it actually is. The issue with that is then we couldn't meaningfully say that the Holocaust was wrong because that society all voted, I think this is the best. Or at least the people on the inside did, and those who weren't, it's none of their concern. Or imagine if we all of a sudden came under some kind of regime that said all people who are above the age of 30 have to cut off their left leg. How many of us would go, it's all relative? No, I think a lot of us would stand up and go, that's not fair. You can't do that to me. I have a right to. But you hear in that moment, what are you appealing to? What is the sense of right and wrong or fair or unfair? The Bible says that when God created us and breathed into us his character, that his character is actually our measure of what's right and wrong. It's simply put like this. Everything that God is like is good. Everything that God is like is good, and everything that God is not like is bad. It's that simple. You don't have to argue hypotheticals or anything else like that. In a culturally relative society, every time you argue for moral relativity, that everyone's morality is their own, you always get saying some really uncomfortable things. And I had talked to someone one time and they said, well, I believe that everything's just cultural. Everything's culturally normative. And so you ask them the question, okay, so what if we were standing here in California and all of a sudden Nevada made a new rule that you could, if someone was under the age of 12 and you killed them and you decided that you wanted to do that, then there'd be no penalty against it. Now, let's say him and I with our kids crossed the border and I said, oh, perfect. Look, I can now take out your son. He would go, no, you can't. Do you really think in that moment he would go, ugh, rule of the land? And the other argument is, well, maybe he wouldn't because he's so founded in California's rules that do you really think he feels that way because he lived in California? Do we really feel like that is the moral framework because of where we are actually located? Do you ever think there's going to be a civilization where people are able to vote on genocide and it's okay? Even the horrific crimes we see in the past, when we look at them now, we go, that was wrong. That was awful. And someone who doesn't believe in God doesn't have a really rational standpoint to sit there. You might go, well, Sam Harris wrote The Moral Landscape. He's an atheist. And he says, well, whatever is good is whatever's best for the most amount of people. And whatever is wrong is what's the worst for the most amount of people. So it's very utilitarian. The issue with that is what happens when him and I disagree on what's best for the most amount of people. You're also arguing from the assumption that our genes want to, by nature, live. You got to ask the question then, well, why? Why is it good that the most amount of people should thrive? Why is thriving good? If we are nothing but a bunch of blind bags of stardust wandering around the universe, then why would our stardust all of a sudden want to survive? You have to answer that question first. So you go, well, it's good to live. Why is it good to live? Why isn't it better that we all just die? These are all things that we have to ask. Why would our genome naturally want to survive? It doesn't really make sense. You have to put some kind of assumption based underneath that. And so he said, whatever's best for the most amount of people. Well, what happens when your civilization wants to nuclear warhead my civilization and mine wants to nuclear warhead yours? And my argument is, if your people were gone, our world would be better. You know, there's countries all around the world that think that America's so immoral that it'd be better if we were wiped off the map. So would you sit there and go, well, if they voted on it, then we got to take this warhead? No, we would all stop and go, you can't do that. In fact, if your plan is to kill all of us, we might take it on ourselves to end you. Well, all of a sudden, if the leader of this country and that country got in a ring, who would win? We might say, well, whoever's got the biggest warhead or whoever's got the biggest army. But we're not actually answering the question of what's right and wrong. We're using the question of power. At the end of the day, if I believe it's better for the most amount of people that this country's gone and they believe it's better for the most amount of people that America's gone, how would we defend ourselves? Wouldn't we just be in a verbal bickering match? We need something foundational, something bigger than our argument to define what is right and what is wrong. God is the objective moral measure of what is right and wrong. That is the fourth evidence for God's existence.